G'day and welcome to the Spearo podcast, the world's number one dedicated spearfishing podcast. I'm your host, Turbo, and today we have an absolutely fantastic episode where my good mate Shrek interviews the author of Deep. That's right, he interviews James Nestor. And Deep, the tagline reads, Freediving, Renegade Science and What the Ocean Tells Us About Ourselves. Now, James was fascinated by the sport of freediving, in which competitors descend great depths on a single breath. He embeds with a gang of ocean-going extreme athletes and renegade researchers. He finds whales that communicate with other whales hundreds of miles away, sharks that swim in unerringly straight lines through pitch-black waters, and other strange phenomena. Most illuminating of all, he learns that these abilities are reflected in humans' remarkable and often hidden potential, including echolocation, directional sense, and the profound physiological changes we undergo when underwater. Along the way, Nestor unlocks his own freediving skills as he communes with the pioneers who are expanding our definition of what is possible in the natural world and in ourselves. Now, it sounds like an absolutely fantastic read, and Shrek does a great job interviewing James, so you're in for an absolute treat today. All right, now before we get into it, we've got some very sad news. We've lost a couple of our diving buddies in the last month or so. Unfortunately, Zach Power over in the Makara coast in New Zealand passed away while spearfishing. So our thoughts go out to his family, and we wish you all the best. And Scott Maguire in Barroby Point in Anna Bay. Scott was out chasing lobster and has also passed away. So thoughts go out to his family as well. And guys, it's a stay safe out there, buddy up, and look after each other. And it's always horrible news to hear about these deaths. So all the best moving forward to their family and friends. Okay, moving on from that. We've got a couple of reviews for the Spearo podcast. We'd just like to say thank you. We always love to say thank you for your reviews. So thank you to Crafty Catch and Josh Humbert for the Spearo podcast reviews. And a book review from Rob Johnson is an absolute cracking review. This intro is getting a bit long, so I won't read it out. But a big thank you to you over in Miami, mate, for that. We really appreciate that. Also coming up, a little birdie has told me that we may be getting the world record holder for wahoo and the world record holder for dogtooth tuna coming on the show soon. So stay tuned for that. I won't dob him in exactly who he is, but I'm sure a lot of you know who he is, and we'll be very keen to learn how he managed to take two huge scalps in under, I think it was a week. So absolutely fantastic trip that he had, and got some great results. So we'll be talking to him hopefully very shortly in the future. So stay tuned for that one. All right, well, that's all from me. Let's throw it over to Shrek and get into today's episode with James Nestor.
Guys, support the Spearo podcast by shopping with today's sponsor, spearfishing.com.au. That's right, you can use the code Spearo and save $20 on all purchases over $200. If you're looking for that next spear gun or wetsuit, then spearfishing.com.au has got a huge range of equipment for you to go and check out. There's good reviews on there about everything from booties to budgie smugglers, so enjoy and get hold of something good. If you live here in Australia, check out Adreno's physical stores in Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane, and join over 60 underwater experts to get advice about everything you need for equipment. Thank you for shopping with our sponsor, spearfishing.com.au, and supporting the Spearo podcast. G'day, Spearo community. Today we are joined by James Nestor from, where are you today, by the way, James? I didn't even ask before.
I'm in sunny San Francisco, which isn't sunny at all.
Cool. And so James is the author of Deep, and I've been wanting to get him on the show actually since 2016, since about the middle when I got hold of your book, Deep. And one of the listeners actually reached out to me and prodded me to read it. Chris Schlenner's his name. So thanks, Chris, for your recommendation. So I've hooked up with James today, who I believe got out for a bit of a spear on the weekend. So welcome to the show, James.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Cool. So look, tell the listeners a little bit about how you got involved with freediving and spearfishing in general, James, and what your experience has sort of been so far.
Yeah, I've been a surfer all my life and spent most of my time in my younger years in the ocean, but I had never really gone below the surface until I was sent by Outside Magazine to cover a freediving competition in Greece and saw freediving for the first time and really blew my mind. It was pretty horrifying what a lot of these competitors ended up doing to themselves, but I also saw another side of freediving. The people who made it, it was really glorious and kind of a beautiful thing to watch. And luckily I met some other freedivers who weren't competitors, but they were Spearos and they understood freediving from a different perspective, more philosophical perspective. And I was lucky enough to hang out with them for about a year and a half and learn the ways of the world down there.
Yeah, that was Hanlu Prinsloo. Is that? Have I got her name right?
Yeah, that's her, and Fred Boyle, also Belgian freediver.
Yeah, he's a friend of one of the guys we've had on the show. So it's funny how small the world is, I guess. Fred, I also pestered him to get him on the show as well. He's a good friend of one of the guys on the show, David Ochoa, and got another connection as well because you had a Skype equalising session with Ted Hardy, a former guest on the show as well. So did Ted help you sort of overcome your equalising concerns?
Yeah, I mean, he's a real master of the craft. I loved his approach. It was really the opposite of what I had heard a lot of other freediving teachers instruct students in the ways in which to do things. I just loved his hard-ass, real clear, direct approach to this. It's a technology. It's in your body. Here's how to do it. There's a right way. There's a wrong way. And I really responded to that.
Yeah. No, our listeners actually responded well to him as well. He's a top guy. We've chatted with Ted a few times. He still writes a good column in Spearing Magazine. So are you still writing for Outside Magazine?
Sure. Yeah, I still write for magazines, Outside and Men's Journal, New York Times, but I've been in the book world for a while now, and so I haven't had too much time to do magazine stories, unfortunately. I've just been sort of mired in book work.
All right, cool. Now, I picked up deep. I was kind of amazed because you go from this freediving competition in Greece and you see some horrifying stuff, and then you sort of enter the spiritual side of freediving, if you like, the more free, not doing it to see how long you can do it for, more of just the actual free side of freediving. And you get around to some really amazing locations in the book. Can you tell us about kind of a few? I mean, the diving you did with Fred with the bull shark sounds pretty amazing as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting to be coming from zero, having no experience in freediving, and then being able to learn this stuff from really, I think, some of the best people in the world to train it, who understand it. It's been part of their life for decades, and it was just a real privilege to see the world through their eyes for a little bit and understand what freediving is, the proper way of freediving, and the opposite of what I saw with a lot of those competitors. How your body's really smart, your brain is evolved to learn to get you out of trouble, and you shouldn't ever turn that off. And I think that was a really important lesson I learned from both Hanley and Fred, to listen to your body. When your body says I need a breath, kick up and get a breath. Don't deny that. That's millions of years of evolution, at work. And I think if you follow those rules, freediving can be, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, I understand, but it can just be a really meditative, peaceful, and safe practice if you just follow a few simple rules.
Yeah. I mean, despite, I've had quite a long background in the underwater world. Despite that, when I picked up your book and read it, I didn't pick it up. I do the Kindle thing. But, I really liked your explanation, the way you walked through the mammalian dive reflex, the way the body responds to the water. I thought probably because you had a fresher perspective, you just wrote about it in a way that had a lot of clarity. And let's sort of can we talk a little bit about the master switch now and the body's adaptation to water, if you like. Can we go into that now? Because I just really enjoyed the way you explained it. Maybe it is because you were so fresh to it and you were surrounded by such high caliber people is one way to explain it, I guess.
Yeah, I just thought that all of the mammalian dive reflex stuff was so interesting because it didn't separate freedivers from the rest of the world. We all have this stuff within us. We used to use it all the time, and now, we're sitting behind computers and eating Cheetos all day, and so we just haven't had a chance to really tap into it. And once you feel that switch go off within yourself, I just got really curious about what was happening to my own body, how it was affecting me, how I could learn more about it and use those reflexes that we're all born with to dive deeper, and still be under control. So what I thought was really interesting was some of the early research that had been done in the 60s and even before that in the 1800s with ducks. Why can ducks hold their breath for 12 minutes and chickens can hold their breath for 3 minutes? What's the difference and what are the functions and reflexes happening between both of those animals? And how do they relate to us? And so the deeper I went into it and the science of it, the more I got fascinated, especially in regards to other animals like, Weddell seals who can swim down 2,000 feet for 90 minutes at a time. Like, how do you do that? Our understanding of physics is that there's no way these animals can have enough oxygen to support their system, and yet they do it all the time. And it just shows the limitations of our understanding of nature right now. And I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I did too. And I mean, you're fairly self-deprecating in the opening sort of. Well, probably to the halfway point of the book, really, where I guess you start to feel a bit more confident in the water. What were some of the obstacles you had personally to start getting down and getting more comfortable in the water? Because I remember it took you, even though you had some good mentors, it still took you a while to get down and start getting comfortable at depth.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think if I was introduced to freediving through the AMA or through some really responsible and philosophical Spearos or through someone other than competitors, I think I would have had a really different relationship with it. But physically, I could hold my breath right out the door. I could hold my breath for a decent amount of time. I wasn't scared of water. I'm in the ocean all the time. But it was a mental challenge for me that really took months and months and months because I had seen what happened to Herbert Niches, at 832 feet. It was just about the worst thing I'd ever seen. I'd seen what had happened to all the other competitors who'd come up dead and bleeding and all that. And, so it was the mental side of it that really took the longest. And I just had to saturate my brain with those more rosy pictures of swimming with whale sharks or, swimming with real sharks or swimming with dolphins to understand that this is a natural thing. Doesn't have to be a unnatural, competitive thing. It can just be, something really nurturing and meditative. And it's that side that I really glommed onto.
Yeah, okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah. To see some of the things you did straight out of the gate, that would have been a huge shock to the system, and to associate that with freediving, it would be like an obstacle in and of itself. It's just kind of a little bit unusual from a lot of the people we talk to, I guess, because their first experience wasn't watching, people at the end of a really long deep dive in blackout or Samba state. I mean, it is shocking to see it. We were talking with someone a while ago about some of the benefits of actually seeing a blackout. Because it makes you much more aware of how to respond in the event, your buddy pushes it a bit far and he blacks out, and what to do in that situation. But I mean, I guess you had completely the opposite experience. You saw like numerous people black out, and then blood coming from their ears and their eyes and the mouth. It was a big shock factor, and I got the feeling when I read the book that you really didn't enjoy that experience very much.
Yeah, that's it, to say it lightly. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. The first time I saw it, I just thought, holy crap, this is real, this Crazy. Is serious. But everyone else was laughing about it, and the person was kind of cracking up. But once a guy comes up dead for a couple minutes, the laughs and giggles kind of go away a little bit, and the gravity of the situation really sets in. And I think that it was a good wake-up call for me. I think it was a good wake-up call for a lot of the other competitors out there. Just to be clear, if anyone wants to dive competitively, I say go for it. Like, that's your right to do that. I think it's awesome. Enjoy it, but that just doesn't mean I have to ever watch it again. I just did not enjoy the experience at all, and especially with Herbert Niches. He's this guy, like, super stud, super fit, amazing free diver, and now he's paralyzed. So it's just a real warning, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm such a conservative diver now. I think I could probably go a lot deeper than I actually go. But in the back of my mind, I still think of those things, and I don't want that to happen, and so I just prefer to stay in control the whole time and never get close to having that happen.
Yeah, well, just quickly, the Herbert Niches thing was he doing? I remember reading one chapter, and they were doing weighted sled dives, like down to just horrific, like sperm whale depths or something. Was that when he suffered the injury, or?
Yeah, he went down on a weighted sled with some turbo boost that took him back up, and he went down over 800 feet, and came back up in real bad shape. And it sucked because he's such a cool guy, and you could tell everything was wrong with the dive. The weather was wrong, the currents were wrong, he was not in the right headspace, but there was a whole news crew from 60 Minutes there, and he felt he had to do it anyway. It's just, it's not worth it. And luckily, right after that, the next month, I went and hung out with 80-year-old Amma, who have been free diving for, their culture's been around for 2,500 years, and these women were 80, and they've been diving every day since they were 15. It's like, what side do you want to hang out and learn from more? And I chose the Amma side on that. So.
Yeah, I was pleased you got all of the perspectives, and the diving on Reunion Island sounded like a bit of an experience as well. Like your book's really well written. I remember reading about the taste of the beer there. It's just good that you gave the full experience of freediving. How did you switch over into spearfishing? Because in the book you don't really talk much about spearfishing. But how did you make the switch? What happened there?
Yeah, I actually didn't do any spearing while I was writing the book. I had a really insane delivery date on the book, and so I was still freediving as much as I could to get context on that and just working the rest of the time around the clock. So with spearing, it was after I had delivered the book that I had a few acquaintances who had been spearing and said, you should try this. It incorporates freediving, but you're also spearing. And to be honest, I was pretty resistant to it at the beginning because I'm kind of an animal rights, I won't say activist, but someone who supports that. And it wasn't until I saw spearing and understood it that I realized, if you're going to eat meat, if you're going to eat fish, this is the most environmentally responsible way of doing it. You're seeing what you're shooting. This isn't putting a net in and grabbing 2,000 fish and picking out 10% of them. And that's when I realized, if I'm going to eat fish and I am going to eat it, then this is the way to do it. And so once I saw that, and it's instantaneous too. These fish aren't growing in a farm. They're out in the open. 1 minute they're there, 1 minute they're not. And once I kind of got over that hump, I started really enjoying it. I had a pretty interesting experience. The second time I ever went spearing, I went to a river, the Sacramento River, and interviewed these guys who were spearing stripers in a river. And so it was these floating dives where they drop you off on a boat. You're going like 5 knots along the riverbed just looking for fish with your spear out, which was a pretty psychedelic experience, but I loved it. I thought it was amazing, and just it just fascinated me even more with spearing. I wanted to learn more about it.
To be honest, I think your mindset going in was probably a good one to go on, because you headed in straight away with a very selective way of hunting, and I mean it is one of the things that a lot of people realize, I guess, when they do start spearfishing, is how selective it is. Like, you don't shoot what you don't want, and sometimes people just free dive and don't shoot anything, so that's really cool. So I mean, did you get in and start spearing these stripers while you were reporting there, or did you sort of did you come back later on and have a go?
No, they got me in the water the first day, and luckily I had been doing enough free diving that I had my breath holds down pretty well. But it's a different experience. You know, the river is really cloudy. You can maybe see 7 feet in front of you. So you would just sit down there and something would just pop up in front of you, and you would just have to be so fast. So this was definitely highly advanced spearing, but it was also one of the more fun things I'd done in years. And hung out with these guys. We camped out, ate what we caught that night, and went out the next day, and really got me intrigued. And so I was able to, I go up ab diving up in Mendocino. And so after you catch your limit of abs, I always bring my gun and, try to get some rockfish after that.
Nice.
But it's, I suck as a Spearo. I totally blow, but I love the experience of being in the water, being connected with everything down there, and just being part of the ecosystem. It's something I think about all the time.
Now, you raised a really interesting point, because hunting in like reduced visibility, 7 or 8 feet of viz is really difficult. I mean, so what did the guys teach you about did they teach you about how to have your gun positioned in the right direction, how to sight down the barrel? I mean, what were some of the things you learned? Did you actually shoot anything on that first occasion?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's epic.
It wasn't quite a prized fish, but, it worked. I got something.
Oh, cool.
So it was interesting. Their understanding, I had never done any spearfishing in freshwater. So their understanding of currents and how you would have to go into these little coves and you just sit on the riverbed down there and just wait. And, amidst all the murk and clouds, you would just see these sort of shadows looming in the background, and you would have to wait until one got close enough and then shoot it. And it was, it was really kind of an otherworldly experience. Nothing I've ever really seen or felt before being down there. So their understanding of that body of water, its moods, its dangers, its movements, it was interesting to learn about it. And, a month later, I went back with them and caught a pretty decent fish on another river up there. So,
oh, sweet.
Yeah, I was kind of hooked after that.
Yeah. I mean, when you get something to start with and you eat it, I think that's how some of us catch the bug. I mean, I know that's how I kind of caught it, and a couple of those early wins sort of kept me going. So what did you spear a month later? Similar species or something different?
Yeah, little striper. So,
cool.
This guy caught like a 40-pounder, just this freaking monster. Mine was, about a quarter of that size, but still it was cool. And, the fact that we're not just spearing shit and throwing it away, like everything was eaten, everything was processed, and, the guts were given to a dog. And so that's, to see that process in that way made me appreciate spearing and hunting a lot more. Some people can rip on it, but if they're meat eaters, and I just don't think it's any better going into a Whole Foods and buying some burgers. Like if you're gonna eat meat, like catching your own stuff is that's the way to do it. I think it's ethically the best thing to do. I think it's health-wise, it's the best thing to do. So environmentally as well. And I promised my wife last year, I was like, I'm only going to eat seafood that I catch. And I didn't really live up to that at all, but, maybe one year.
I think, being connected to your foods is one of the awesome things about being a Spearo, and you brought that up well. Guys, Spearing Magazine, join the Noob Spearo podcast. They've got some of the best contributors in the world. They've got stories from all corners of the globe. And if you're interested in contributing something, you can head along to spearingmagazine.com. Head up there to the top right corner, get into the menu, and there's become a contributor to Spearing Magazine. Now, some of the guests on our show have been contributors, or they regularly contribute. We've had Jessica Cripps, Michael Takash, and Ted Hardy contributes a regular section. It's probably the best quality magazine, pound for pound, in the world. So get in there, check out the photography. It's an awesome heavyweight magazine. You can also get the digital edition. So head over to spearingmagazine.com to learn a bit more. Join them on social, Facebook, Insta, or YouTube.
Guys, Christmas is just around the corner, and I bet that there's somebody in your life that wants to treat you to some spearfishing gear. So don't be shy, give them a hint. Now, give them a hint that Penetrator is having a 15% off sale of some of their stock. Tell them to get onto penetrator.com, have a look at that extensive range they've got there, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be lucky enough to pick yourself up a new pair of Penetrator spearfishing fins just in time for Christmas. All right, so that's penetratorfins.com.
Look, let's just move to another sort of part of the show. James, what's one of the toughest situations you've been in the ocean? I remember reading about going down in a homemade submarine. But you've done several scary things on the ocean. I mean, what's one of the toughest situations you've been in?
Yeah, the submarine, it was tough and on a different level, more on a psychological level, because at least when you're spearing or freediving, you're in control of where you're going. You know, whenever you want to go up, you go up. You want to go deeper, you go deeper. When you're in like a guy's homemade sub, he's entirely in control, and you just have to give that up. Having said that, that guy Carl Stanley, definitely one of my heroes. This guy, everyone told him he couldn't do it. He couldn't make a sub. He built his first one in his parents' backyard, and he spent more time between 1,000 and 2,000 feet than anyone in history in his homemade sub. So, take that, U.S. Navy. You know, there you go. As far as other scary stuff, honestly, I think the scariest experiences I've had have been on the surface, surfing, by far. Ocean Beach out here at San Francisco can be a pretty brutal place, and I've had some kind of close calls out there. But under the water, I don't think I've ever come anywhere close to a blackout for all the reasons I explained before. But I've seen some animals that have definitely spooked me. Sperm whales, about 60 feet long, 8-inch long teeth. Pretty gnarly, but at the same time, if they wanted to kill you, you would have been dead before you even knew it. So, it's just acclimating and understanding the motions of those animals. I think is an interesting thing.
Okay, cool. I mean, let's go there now. I mean, the next part of the show is the Veterans Vault, so it's sort of where we, go deep into an area of our guest's expertise. I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the research and things that you cover in your book, and sperm whales was part of it, and you seem to be quite involved. I've seen another bit of a TED talk and another talk where you're talking specifically about researching and studying the way these animals communicate underwater, because it's not a very well understood area of science. I mean, some of it is, but some of it's not. And sperm whales was one of the areas I think you were kind of interested in. So, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned about sort of these large mammals' communication in the water?
Yeah, sure. And we don't have to. I can wait too. I didn't know that was something you were saving. I'm more than happy to talk about other stuff. But if you want to talk about this now, that's cool as well. Okay.
I'm really interested in it. I think most people are kind of curious about it. I found it. I found it endlessly fascinating. But yeah, I mean, we can talk about a lot of things. So yeah.
Sure. I think that it's. That experience you get when you first do a pretty deep dive, when you first shoot your first fish and cook it up. It's like one of those paradigm shifting experiences. I would definitely put diving face to face with sperm whales. I can't imagine a more life shifting experience, at least for me. And not just, the danger of it, but I'm not going to try to sound too woo-woo or new age here, but there's a connection with these animals. These animals have brains 6 times the size of ours. They're in many ways, in most ways, more complex and evolved. We've had our brain size for 200,000 years. They've had theirs for 15 million years, and there's this sense of knowing you're in the water with this thing, you just get this vibe. This thing knows so much, and it's a real deep understanding of the way the world works. And every single person I know that swam with these animals, even from, some hard-ass people who, claim to, nothing ever impresses them. Like, you don't come out of this experience unchanged. And so
Okay. Wow.
after having had that experience and having looked at what little research had been done to understand these animals' communication, we've known for 60 years that these animals are communicating in a way that is likely far more sophisticated than any human communication. It's likely a digital form of communication that they shoot in these sound beams. This isn't some crazy hypothesis. This is all real stuff. But no one's been able to crack it, to understand it, because you can't put a 60-foot long animal in a lab. So the only way to do this is by freediving with them, carrying the equipment down, engaging them, and collecting data that way. And this is something no marine researcher has ever wanted to do or could do. But now we have the technology. Technology is very small now and very powerful. And now we have the methods through freediving to really collect some real data on these animals. And so this is this initiative. I'm working with a researcher, David Gruber, very well-known dude. He's at Harvard now. And Jean Koster, who's done a bunch of other conservation work with drones. We're starting this whole big thing to actually make this happen, at least, to try to make it happen. So that's the goal. So if you don't hear from me next year, that means that everything went terribly wrong and we all got munched, and that's an end of story. But that's we just, none of us, academics aren't doing anything really in this world. I should be careful there. Yeah. They aren't cracking the language. They're researching sperm whales in some other very amazing and impressive ways, but no one's focusing on cracking this language. And with machine learning and AI, we're cracking the mouse language code. We're cracking the bat language code right now. Let's ramp it up to whales and see what they have to say.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound ambitious. I mean, I read the book myself, and the title of your book, I mean, is Renegade Science, and I mean, some people might have labeled some of the areas of science that you kind of investigated as pseudo, but after reading the book, I definitely understood it was more renegade. It's just kind of outliers, researchers that have got the sort of the stones to try some of these bigger projects. So I really enjoyed that, and the fact that you yourself had enough courage, I guess, to take on and go on and have a look at some of these guys, areas of research, and it really intrigued me. A lot of it, and even some of the more well-known forms of communication, like the dolphins. You talk about one lip is used for whistling and one is used for clicking. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
And they have their own names and sequencing of how they do that. I found the whole lot of it really intriguing. So if people are interested in that, definitely go and check out James's book Deep on Audible or Amazon. I'll have the links in the show notes, so listeners can go and check it out. But I also wanted to shift, if that's all right, James, unless you wanted to talk a little bit more about it.
No, I think that the sperm whale stuff, that's pretty much the summary, the foundation that we've started. And trust me, no one here is making any money on this crap. We're working at night to make this happen because we all care about this. But we just got, nonprofit status. We're actually going to do this, but it's at SETI.Foundation. And cool. In about 6 months, we're going to be looking for some real badass freedivers to do some whale research. So, so if anyone's interested, give me a holler.
All right, sweet. And so SETI.org, was it? SETI.org?
Yeah, CETI.
CETI.
Yeah, it's a playoff of SETI, the extraterrestrial communication project. So.
All right, cool. All right, so anyone can go and check that out. So that sounds pretty cool. I wanted to go back a little bit into the physiology side of things. Blood shift is not something every Spearo understands unless they've read Manual of Freediving or one of the other similarly intimidating books that are out there. what do you understand about blood shift and kind of, how our physiology adapts, I guess, to diving at depth?
I think it's interesting when you follow a diver down. This is something I tried to do in the book, like all the different changes that occur. It's even in a sink of water. If you put your face into a sink of cold water, your heart rate's gonna lower about a third. Blood is gonna start shifting from your extremities into your core. And all of these reflexes are just going to start adding up. And the deeper you go, the more pronounced they get. So I thought it was pretty fascinating that the way that lungs are able to stay preserved is that they fill up, your body instinctively knows to fill them up with plasma to protect them from the crushing pressure down so deep, and the organ walls opening to allow for the free flow of fluids. And one of the most mind-blowing things to me was how low the heart rate gets. A freediver has recorded a heart rate at 7 beats per minute, which every physiologist has said is completely impossible that could support consciousness, and yet it does. And just to speak to this, the quote pseudoscience or what people alleged in the book, it's all that stuff is supported by actual science. And it's funny that some stuff gets labeled as pseudoscience until it's proven, and then everyone backtracks and just says, "Oh, good point," and they move on. Just a little side thing, like magnetoreception, that humans have a magnet in our head and we know where magnetic north is. Everyone called BS on that, for 30 years. A guy was kicked out of college for studying that, and look, we found 2 years ago that that's actually what happened. So I think that's what's interesting about freediving is doctors and people in medicine, like we all think we have the human body all figured out, and we've had it figured out for 20 years. But every time someone goes past a limit, we have to redefine what's possible in the human body, and that goes to the first ever freediving competition. In off the coast of Italy, they said the deepest we could go was 100 feet. Any deeper, and the math worked out that we would die. And now people are going to 300, 400 feet easy. So I think all of those reflexes and reactions that happen in the body, it's a good reminder. I don't think it shows us how superhuman we are. It just shows us how human we are, and we've just forgotten that connection of all the amazing stuff we can do if we're just allowed to do it.
No, that's cool. Good explanation. I enjoyed that in the book. You've got a sort of a chapter dedicated to following a body down and sort of exploring exactly what happens at sort of every depth, and then you carry that on beyond the known limitations of our human bodies and go right down to the floor of the ocean. And I really enjoyed, because I'm sort of fascinated by the ocean. I think most Spearos are in some ways. It just depends on how fascinated or how curious we are about it. But that was really an interesting part of it. Another thing was I was sort of curious to ask you about was, have you done any research into how diet can change the human body? There's been a lot of talk in recent years about the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting. I know that a lot of freedivers won't eat on the morning or in the preceding sort of time before they do a big swim. Have you done any research in this area?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and to be honest, I haven't done too much research, although I know from all the top freedivers that I've interviewed, almost all of them follow a stringent alkaline diet, standard, no processed foods, no fried foods. If God made it, or, if man made it, don't eat it, that kind of approach. And the claim was that an alkaline diet is going to allow your muscles to absorb more oxygen, and so you'll have those stores of oxygen. I wish I could describe the science behind that more, but I can't. It seems like that's pretty well proven to this extent, like that, an alkaline, non-processed food diet, you're just going to be healthy, healthier mind, you're going to be able to think more clearly, your body's going to be healthier. How it specifically affects each depth in freediving, I don't really know.
Yeah, it's kind of endlessly fascinating. Like you say, so little is understood about the human body. Really, we get a bit arrogant sometimes. I mean, the ketogenic diet, sort of, from what my understanding is, it switches our metabolism over from glycogen into ketones, and our body just runs in a completely different way. But it just sounds far more. Maybe it's more in a more alkaline state, but it also, your body uses less oxygen by the sounds of it. I don't even fully understand the mechanism, so I was curious to ask you about how far down that sort of rabbit hole that your research had taken you. So, no, that's cool. Let's go back to Magneto reception. Now, in the spearfishing world, in recent years, we've seen some guys develop the Hex suit, and they've incorporated the Faraday cage technology into a wetsuit to minimize, the body's electrical signal, if you like. This is not strictly magneto reception, but I mean, let's go there. It's kind of related. What do you think about this technology and how it relates to spearfishing, I guess?
Yeah, they've been, experimenting with this for decades. And I was in the Bahamas about a year and a half ago with two Belgian guys who had developed a new system that was all working with magnetic fields, and whenever the shark would come near there, they would, send out the signal, which would mess with their ambuli of Lorenzini. And it worked. I saw it. I mean, these guys were freaking nuts. They had this thing set up. They baited the water for 2 days, and then they got in the water with a bunch of tiger sharks and lemon sharks. And they turned this thing on, and man, it worked. It absolutely worked. But just because it worked once doesn't mean that it's going to work every single time. Sharks are highly adaptable. So will they just get used to that? Will it start attracting them? No one really knows. But I've seen the videos, and I've seen some of the science on all of these devices, and it seems legit to me. It looks like all this stuff is actually working now. But again, after a shark, does it a few times, it happens to them a few times, are they just gonna be able to adapt to it? Hopefully not, but I don't think there's enough people who have these to really give proper statistics. It'd be one thing if you suited up everyone in Reunion Island with this stuff and saw if anyone got attacked, for the next year. But I don't think this stuff can hurt, and it seems like some of the science is pretty legit. But will the sharks adapt? I guess we'll find out.
It's a lot of this technology. The problem with it is it's so hard to test. Like, it's not like you've got a controlled lab environment. You're in the marine environment, which is an uncontrolled space. There's too many variables, and I mean, how big is a big enough? There's sample size rules and all this sort of stuff, and peer review. There's not even enough scientists to probably review each other's work. So, the ability to get something through all of the rigors of a scientific protocol just are too stringent, I think. So you've kind of got to just read the logic and see some of the anecdotal truth and make your own mind up about it, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. And, and a lot of it's awareness too. It's if you're going out where a place that's really sharky and it's mating season and you're spearing and you've got a bunch of fish on a line and they're bleeding. I mean, you got to be pretty responsible as well. That to me is that's going to an ATM in a bad part of town at 2 a.m. Like something's going to probably happen. So, in that regards, if this makes someone feel a little more comfortable, and again, I've seen the videos, I've talked to some of the people who have made these devices, and it seems legit. But I think time will tell. All it takes is one surfer or one Spearo to get attacked while wearing one of these things, and I think we'll have our answer there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Shark Shield was one that's been kind of quite well marketed, but I mean, there's various different companies now with this sort of technology. It's designed to disrupt the electrical field or whatever, and the sharks leave the area. The other side of this thing is this Hex suit, which is kind of an incorporated thing that minimizes. It's designed to minimize your electrical output. So basically, fish and other species that are set up to read these signals, they can't do that. Have you seen this technology?
I have, yeah, and it looked pretty interesting. But my understanding of electroreception and how sharks use it is they're using it at real close proximity. I could be wrong with this. It's not something they're sensing from miles away. So if you've got really clear water, I wonder, if that would be enough for a shark to stop from taking a munch on you and seeing what happens. I don't know. I have seen them. I've read a bit about them. They seem interesting. And, maybe it's just layers of precautions. It's like, okay, don't go out in really sharky waters during mating. Don't bait, with blood. Don't have too many fish tied, and wear your hex suit. And, I don't think it's an end-all, be-all solution. But I think it's maybe another layer of safety that could work and be beneficial.
Yeah, a lot of guys are using them for another aspect. I mean, I guess the shark prevention is that, but they're using it more for its hunting advantages, because they think that it minimizes their the ability for some of the fish they're targeting to be able to sense their presence, I guess. So they're trying to sort of use it more for a stealth kind of application. But
got it. No, that's cool. I actually I hadn't heard of that, because when I saw it, it was more positioned for surfing. That's super cool. Whatever works, and it could be, even if it's having a placebo effect, that you feel that much more confident moving around in the water and it's working for you. Who cares, as long as it's working and it's that's awesome. They look pretty cool too. So there's a twofer.
Cool. All right. Interesting. All right. Magneto reception. Now, can you explain us a little bit about sort of this concept? I mean, reading about, sharks hundreds of meters down on the ocean floor following these invisible lines, kind of, it was very intriguing, the fact that we have this ability as people to tune in on this, this ability to tune in on magnetic lines, I guess, ourselves. But sharks definitely do it, and in the marine environment, it's quite well known. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works? It's a difficult one to explain, I think.
Yeah, I thought this was pretty fascinating. This is also something that I had no idea existed, but everyone's been wondering or at least until 40 years ago, how animals get around the globe. Everyone's thought that whales navigated through celestial signs or solar signs, but that doesn't make any sense in storms. It doesn't make sense, when there's haze or clouds overhead. It was just too crazy for anyone to consider that animals could be locked into the Earth's magnetic field. But we found out about 50 years ago in the late 60s, early 70s, that this is exactly what happens. This is how butterflies can fly from one tree to another tree 2,000 miles away. They're not following some path or road signs. They're following this internal sense that is locked into the revolving molten core of our planet. Just like there's a magnetic north. But what's different is it's so precise that sharks and almost every marine animal is using some form of magnetoreception, and they were tagging sharks with satellite tags, and they found that literally they would swim in a straight line thousands of miles from South Africa to the coast of Australia to the same beach every year, back and forth in a straight line at like 1,000 feet down. So how do you do that if there isn't some other sense? And it turned out that humans have this as well. This is the guy who was researching this study 2,000 people, every imaginable variation of experimentation, came out with the results. Everyone called him a pseudoscientist, a fraud, and just a couple years ago, they found in laboratories that humans have magnetoreception. We have this skill too. We've used it for tens of thousands of years. We've just forgotten how to today because we have GPS on all our phones, and there's street signs everywhere. So it's that sort of ancient knowledge that's been lost. I thought was pretty interesting, and it related to freediving a lot too. We're born with this ability to freedive really deep and stay underwater really long. No one believed it until people actually started doing it, and it turns out there's this whole rich history of people freediving all over the planet. I think it's great to rediscover that stuff. It's rediscovering what it's like to be human, and I think that's pretty interesting.
Let's move on. Really good chatting a bit more about some of the deeper and maybe perhaps quirkier areas of your book. But that was sort of the questions I wanted to ask. Next part of the show is the funniest moment. So, you spent a lot of time surfing, freediving, and now you're spearfishing as well. What's one of the funniest things you've seen out on the water?
I don't know if it's funny, but well, it's kind of funny. Up in in Mendocino and Sonoma Coast, you can abalone dive, but and you can only eat abalone that you catch. You can't buy this stuff in stores. And so it's really this prize thing, and there's like this whole macho vibe around it. So you see these guys coming from 4 hours away out to the coast and trying to dive and just forcing themselves down and not understanding if you're able to truly relax, that you're able to go so much deeper and stay for so much longer. And to me, it's really a parable to where I was before I learned about freediving and the nuances to it. And I mentioned that this is funny because these guys are so macho about it, how they could go down 7 feet for 15 seconds, just pushing the whole time. And I think that's just sort of a good, it's an interesting analogy to many things, not only freediving, but other stuff. You got to understand the stuff from the inside. You got to let your body do what it wants to do. Never force it, and never, go to a place where your body is telling you not to. And so it's just a reminder to me every time I see those guys, to try to step back and listen to the ancient wisdom in our bodies and follow that as a guide.
Yeah, it is good. That's kind of good. I think spearfishing and freediving teaches us a few of those lessons, Like when you're too excited, you're never going to shoot a fish, and when you're trying to muscle your way against the water, you're just doing it the hard way. So it's good. There's lots of these things in spearfishing and freediving, I guess, and they teach us a bit of humility, I guess, and like you say, listen to your body and a bit of the internal sense of right, I guess.
For sure, and I think that's the right word. Is humility. It's nice to get your ass kicked on occasion, and freediving, and spearing and surfing and basically anything on the ocean really, really humbles you in a lot of ways. I'd be hard pressed to find someone who hasn't been seriously humbled by the ocean in a big way, and it gives you a larger sense of the world around you. And I think that's why all of us love going back so often and relearning that and getting our butts kicked.
Yeah, for sure. Good stuff. All right, in your dive bag, you mentioned one of these guys gave you a good deal on a Rob Allen before the show. Are you still using a Rob Allen now? Head to toe, what's your sort of go-to spearfishing equipment for Californian waters?
Oh, man, this is not going to impress you guys at all. I'm the sort of person that I won't get good gear until I've proven to myself that I deserve to have good gear. I did the same thing with guitars. I just used an absolutely crap guitar until I, knew all the chords. So I'm still very much a beginning Spearo. I've got a JBL travel spear that I take everywhere with me because it's just so compact. And I think that those are just so beautifully made. I bought some other ones that just ripped up my hands. Big disaster. I've got the Rob Allen when I'm getting a little more serious. I did splurge and get two Elios freediving wetsuits. I can't speak highly enough about those guys. Italian made. They're as cheap as something that you buy off the shelf, but they're all custom fit by this little mom and pop shop. Great stuff. I've had for 4 years. It's just in perfect shape, better than anything else. I think I have a Rob Allen mask, and I mean those are my two spears. As sad as that is, I still have my. And freedivers always give me crap about this, but when I took my first ever freediving course, I bought a pair of plastic SEAC fins. And those are still the same fins I have. And, I mean, you should just hear the crap I'm getting from these guys about getting carbon fiber. I get it, but I kind of want to, like, deserve to get some better equipment. So that's what I'm stuck with now. But it seems to work for me.
Are they longer freediving?
Oh,
plastics,
yeah.
They're fine.
They're really long, and I love them because I can wrap these things up. I have a smaller suitcase. I like to travel light, but I can bend these things up in basically a circle, and it just doesn't matter. They always flop back. They're all scratched and ripped up, but they work, and they work great, and I've been happy with them. But that's definitely on the list, is to get some good carbon fibers for sure.
Yeah, the bad thing about the carbon fiber is, I mean, that the technology's developed and they're pretty tough now. But when you're shore diving, you're probably still better off with your plastics or a set of fiberglass composites, because they do get beat up. And when you've spent $500 or $600 on them, like, I don't want to wear them shore diving. I'd stick with the plastics on beach diving for sure.
You're the only freediver who's told me that, and God bless you. I will. I'll be sticking with them for sure.
There's some old guys here, and they just laugh at all of us spending money on fins. I mean, one of our sponsors for the show, Larry from Penetrator, he makes all the high-end fins. But some of the old guys still wear plastic fins. Obviously you spend more money, you get more economical products, but the plastics are fine, especially for shore diving. I'd stick with them, but yeah, when you want to go out a bit wider and have an easier time of it, I think you can spend some money. But yeah, nothing wrong with it as far as I'm concerned.
Cool, good to hear.
Any other gear of note that you really like with your spearfishing now? Are you keeping your fish out of the water? Are you using a boat float or anything like that?
I have a standard float I've had for a long time. I don't know the brand or anything like that, but that's usually what we do. Sometimes I'll paddle the float out on, I have a huge 10-foot surfboard, and I'll paddle it out on that. But mostly I'm doing shore dives that where the spots aren't too far from shore. So I'm usually paddling out on the float, on a the inner tube float, and doing that. I've been on my list is to get a really good seaworthy kayak, because there's some spots I want to check out up north, but just hasn't happened yet. But that's probably going to happen pretty soon. So I'm hoping.
Epic. If you do get a chance to go up a bit north, check out Jim Russell. He's a top man to take you out, and those guys get some big abs up the northern end of California there. How far north do you have to go to get any abalone?
Well, it has to be north of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm 4 miles from the Golden Gate Bridge, which sounds great. I could just hop off the other side, and we've investigated all those areas, and there's nothing. So you got to drive up about 2.5 hours to the Sonoma coast, and that's where it gets. We've got some secret-ish spots out there, and that's where we go. And the ab population seems to have completely rebounded. It's really healthy now, which just makes you feel good about going down there and grabbing a couple for dinner. So.
All right, and if guys want to check out the legislation for hunting abalone in your area, where would you send them? I just remember talking to a couple of guys over your way, and the rules are quite comprehensive.
Yeah, it's insanely complicated. I mean, it's the California Fish and Game. I think they're Fish and Wildlife now, but they have a pretty comprehensive ab list. The limit now, I think I could have this wrong, is something like 14 a year, 2 a day from certain spots. But they could tell you all that when you get your license. But that's just something like ab diving is. I wish I could do it more. My life has been a little kooky lately, so I haven't been able to do it. But it's something I think about all the time, and
cool.
It's just such a. And like if you don't have a spear or anything, it's something you can just go out there with a wrench and do it, and it's just this really primitive, cool thing to do, and I absolutely love it. It's a good time.
Yeah, cool. All right, sweet. All right, last section of the show, James. Sort of a faster paced round of questions. Spearo Q&A. Let's make it more general. Let's make it freediving and sport of Spearo Q&A. What's the best advice you've received in spearfishing or freediving?
Know your limits.
All right, cool. Who is the most influential person for you in your spearfishing and freediving?
Hanley Prinsloo.
What are the current challenges you face in your spearfishing, and how are you trying to overcome them?
A completely overstuffed calendar of bullshit that just seems to be constantly mounting and not letting me get in the ocean anymore. That's my main challenge. And I want to go deeper. I'm having some equalization issues passed around 70 feet where I just so that's something I want to focus on this next year.
All right. Just quickly off the top of my head, just check your mask. It might be too high volume. I don't want to smash brands here, but I would definitely get a look at a lower volume mask. And for going spearfishing more, we got an article on Noob Spearo. You will have a good laugh at 6 tips to go spearfishing more. There's a good section in there about how to throw a sick day. So maybe you could look at that for some of your appointments.
It sucks when you work for yourself, though. Sick days don't really. I know. You got to look in the mirror when you're talking to the boss, and then sometimes that doesn't go so well.
The boss is an asshole.
Yeah, he's a complete dick. Yep, you're right.
All right, cool. Who's the best spear person for you that you like to go spearfishing with, and why?
I think Greg Fouts. He's the guy that owns the Freedive shop in Sacramento. Very knowledgeable dude. I think that's his last name. I haven't talked to him in a while, but he runs the whole shop up there. And just to see his movement and his control in the water was really impressive.
And you've inspired lots of people that have read your book to have a go at freediving, and perhaps after listening to this episode, people are inspired to try spearfishing. We have a lot of new people that are interested in spearfishing listen to this show. If you had to give them 3 pieces of advice about starting spearfishing, what would they be?
I'd go slow.
Or even 2 or 3.
Okay. Go slow, get comfortable in the water, and again, don't push it. Listen to your body.
All right, cool. Good stuff. All right, awesome. Really good chatting with you, James. Now, we've got a bit of a listener trial. If people want to go to audibletrial.com/Noob Spearo, they can get their hands on your book, Deep. Renegade Science and What the Ocean Tells Us About Ourselves. They can get that book free on there at the moment. Free 30-day Audible trial, and get hold of the Deep book because it's a phenomenal read. Or you can check it out on Amazon.com. You can come along to Noob Spearo. All of this will be linked up in the show notes under James Nestor. But look, where can people get hold of you? Where can they find out a bit more about what you're working on and things like that, James?
I wish I was on social media more often, but I'm not. I have a new website that's coming up in the next couple of days at masterswitch.com. I also post on Facebook whenever, I feel like it, which isn't too often, but that's what I'm working on, a new book right now that should be out in about a year or so, if all goes well. So that's where I'll be spending my time in Book Zone.
All right, wicked. Well, I really appreciate you making time for us today. And if people do go along to MrJamesNestor.com, I went through, I found it quite interesting. There's a lot of videos there, video talks about all of the different, there was the master switch freediving, there was your scuba diving trip down to the little research station there. I think, was that Aquarius you talked about in the book?
Yeah, I hope it's still there after the hurricanes in Florida. I have no idea what happened to it. But let's hope it's still there.
That's crazy. People living on the floor of the ocean in 20 meters of water, and just like it looked like an old beaten up thing in the video. So, but yeah, head along to masterswitch.com. There's a whole lot of articles and stuff you've written there. Really enjoy reading your stuff, James, and I really appreciate you joining us today. So awesome.
Thank you very much. Really, this is really fun.
Okay, guys, I hope you got something out of today's episode with James Nestor. He's an interesting guy. I've heard him on other podcasts, and he's a very interesting man. Thanks, Shrek. Another sterling effort from you. God, you're just always doing good work over there in China, mate. I'm just very impressed with you. Anyways, what was I going to say? Yes, we have an absolutely cracking episode coming up from you. The man himself, Tim McDonald. I know so many of you want to hear from Tim Mac. We always get emails saying, interview Tim McDonald. We call him up and he's just like, oh, not you guys again. No, seriously, we called him once and he come on the show straight away and he shares some absolutely brilliant stuff. We picked 3 of the big name species that everyone has trouble hunting, and he reveals how to get those fish and some of those trophy fish in those species that he got, and how those once in a lifetime conditions came together for him to get those fish. So he tells us everything, leaves nothing out. I'm sure he is leaving something out, but we haven't worked it out yet. So it's a very, very interesting episode. Stay tuned for that one next week. As always, guys, the book is getting just painfully closer to being released. It has just been an absolutely arduous task dealing with Chinese printers and shipping and that kind of thing, but we're getting very, very close. So all of you guys that submitted photographs and all that kind of thing, your copies are on their way. We've got the first 200 off the printing press, so we're very, very excited about that, and they are on their way from a slow boat from China, so it shouldn't be too far away. And also any other potential sponsors that would love to get into that book, get some advertising in that book, get their name out there and share some tips. We've also got room for our next production run to get some tips and some sponsorship in there from you, some of the big names out there. So feel free to contact us, Shrek at Noob Spearo, Turbo at noobspearo.com, and we'll see what we can do there. Alrighty, once again, thanks for all your support. Thank you for tuning in every week. Thank you for throwing up your ideas of who we should interview on the show. We're trying to get as global as we can. So if you're in the US, tell us someone that you want interviewed. If you're in Australia, tell us. If you're in South Africa, in Europe, doesn't matter where you are, dob somebody in a big name, let us know, because we don't know. And we want to share this gold from these experts. So wherever you are in the world, let us know. All right. I've waffled on for more than enough. Have a great fortnight, guys. Hope you get in the water. Hope you shoot some fish. And as always, buddy up and dive safe. Guys, a big thank you to everybody that has visited the Adreno Spearfishing website. That's spearfishing.com.au. A big thank you, because by you using the Noob Spearo code, that supports our principal sponsor, that in turn supports us and keeps this little podcast of ours going, so that you can hear all the tips, tricks and advice from the world's best Spearos. So once again, guys, thanks for getting on to Adreno's website and using the Noob Spearo code at checkout. For those of you that haven't done it yet, on all purchases over $200, you'll save yourself $20. So if you want to support the show and get yourself a red hot deal on some spearfishing gear, get on to spearfishing.com.au and use the code NoobSpearo at checkout. Guys, Christmas just around the corner. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The number one book on the market for any budding Spearo is, of course, 99 Tips to Get Better at Spearfishing, put together by Shrek and myself from over 40 of the world's greatest, best spear fishermen and women. So do yourself a favour, pick up a copy from Amazon, and that PDF will definitely help you become a better Spearo. And in the not too distant future, it's getting closer, the hard copy is on its way. So we can't wait till that gets here, and you can get your hands on a red hot copy of 99 Tips to Get Better at Spearfishing. So at the moment, you can get it at Amazon.